If your password appears on that top 10,000 list, or a good portion of your password appears on that top 10,000 list, then you really do need to do something about it. Howdy and welcome back to the show. Today I wanted to talk about security. What constitutes good security and what you can do as a normal user to protect yourself. Passwords are the simplest and probably the most effective way to secure yourself online and in your own home. So there's two distinct varieties of attacks, or two common ones if you like. One is attacking your online accounts, so your Yahoo, your Google, your Gmails, Facebook and so on. And the other is attacking you at home, your home network, your modem router connected to the internet, right, on the Wild Wild West side before it comes into your own house. They can attack you that way and get information and compromise your security and your network. So what can you do about passwords? Well, first things first, there is pretty much a top 10,000 password list. If your password appears on that top 10,000 list, or a good portion of your password appears on that top 10,000 list, then you really do need to do something about it quite quickly. As an example, we'll take a quick look. So as you can see here, I've Googled top 10,000 passwords, and you'll get a series of lists which give you the top 10,000 passwords. You can even get these in a text file, download them, put them into a spreadsheet or a word processor, sort them alphabetically, and take a look and see whether or not your password or a portion of your password appears in that list. This is the easiest way someone can circumvent your security. Download the top 10,000 passwords. It's about 90% of the people who use a password, right? Yours probably appears in there, or it can. And they use that to do scripted attacks on online accounts as well as your home network. That doesn't take very long. That realistically is only a couple of hours worth of work in order to be able to start an automated attack on an online account, an online system, or on your home network. And obviously they're not sitting there typing in passwords. These are automated, scripted, computer-driven attacks. So they're quite fast and they're fairly easy for someone to set up. And they don't have to put a lot of effort in. They can just let it run. So if you're in the top 10,000 list, change your password pretty quickly. So what else is the train of thought? What sort of train of thought is there around passwords? Well, it's developed quite a lot over the last few years, and most people, when they think of a password, they give it about 6 seconds, maybe 60 seconds worth of thought. But the people that are thinking about what constitutes a password have been thinking about it quite a lot. And because of the number of databases that have been spilled onto the internet, people who want to understand what constitutes a password and what common passwords are have a lot of information to draw on. So, if your passwords consist of family members' names, friends' names, sporting club associations, sports, personal interests, hobbies, pet names, dates of birth, street names, car regos and the like, or any combination of those, forward or reverse, you don't really have a secure password. They're the basic building blocks of what is already understood to be the most common password approach. So those building blocks constitute about 90-95% of everyone that thinks up a password. It's not too difficult with the blogs and the amount of social media and the other things that are available at the moment. It's not hard for someone to build up a little profile, get pieces of information together, use a bit of nous and actually build a targeted password list that they can use to circumvent your security. Technically, they could do that in a few hours, and they could spend a few more hours attacking your accounts. You've been compromised within a day, and that's not hard to do. So, who's doing those attacks? It can be a bored 12-year-old who's got access to the internet. It can be someone who's got a malicious intent, someone who'd like to continue spamming or distributing malware and viruses, someone who's actually after identity theft or potentially even financial theft. There's a myriad of reasons behind it, but it all comes down to having a good, strong password. So what else can you do? Along with the passwords, have a nice, strong password, alphanumeric, right, uppercase, lowercase, and containing symbols, as well as change them on a periodic basis. If you're not changing passwords for 12 months, technically you're giving someone a 12-month window to be able to guess, do a brute force attack on your password. So what's a brute force attack? Well, if we take a look at a basic web page, right, here's a simple one here. This is Yahoo's logon. This is how you would log on to your Yahoo Mail. Your username is not too difficult to guess, right? And most logons, the actual logon, the username component, it's either a portion of an email address or it's actually an email address. The password is where all of the security is built in. If you're using a minimum of 4 characters, 6 characters, it's too short. You need a minimum of 8 characters, and that simply means the shorter the password, the easier or the less amount of time is required for someone to break it. A brute force attack means that they go to the front page of such an online account, whether it's Yahoo, Gmail, Facebook, your bank. They will go to that front page and they'll continue to guess your username and password until they get it right. That's a brute force attack. A system vulnerability attack, and there's mostly only 2 types. A systems vulnerability attack is the user attempting to get access to Yahoo or Gmail or Facebook and so on, not through the front door, not through a username and a password, but through some sort of systems of vulnerability. They get in through the back, find a gap, find a hole, and pull personal information out that way. That's how most of these database spills have actually occurred. You can't control the system's security. You can only use a reputable provider that will spend lots of time and lots of money on ensuring that they've got the best possible security in place. What you can do is you can control how easy it is for a brute force attack to be successful using a good password. So all of those parts we've already talked about with your password, don't do those. Come up with something that is lowercase, uppercase, letters and numbers, and special characters. Right, you've got quite a lot to choose from on a keyboard, and make it a minimum of 8 characters. If you can make it longer, 16, 24 characters or even better. Right, but a minimum of 8, and nearly every online system I'm aware of will let you have at least 8. Other security features that have been implemented by many online systems include number of attempts. 10 goes at a password, didn't get it right, the account's locked out. Or if you've got an SMS warning feature turned on, they'll send you an SMS. Or if something looks suspicious and it triggers a flag, something else will take place and they can control the security around that account. That's still, it's good, but it can still be very inconvenient, and you can't guarantee that every online resource has those kinds of features in place. Some will just let a person script an attack and just keep going until they've guessed your password. Chances are, if you've already got a weak password, you're also using the same password on every one of your online accounts. So once they've got one, technically they've got them all, right, and they can wreak havoc. So alphanumeric, special characters, upper and lower case, nothing out of the dictionary, nothing to do with any of those things we've already talked about, the street you live in, the name of your pet, dates of birth, anniversaries, family, friends' names and so on. None of those, forward or reversed. And yeah, that's what constitutes a password. Nothing out of the dictionary, nothing that can be easily guessed or strung together, associated to you. So how do you get a good password? You can come up with little tricks and little ways of building certain components together that make sense to you to come up with a good password, or use a password generator. They're pretty good, and 80% of us out there have probably got a smartphone on us, and you can use some of these smartphone apps to generate passwords for you as well as store all of your logons and your passwords. And it's not hard to have 15, 20, 30, 40 of these different logons and passwords. So how secure are those apps? Well, if you're using not an app, but you're using something like Notepad or Notes, on your iPhone, it's not secure at all, obviously. But if you're using one of these apps, the majority of the apps have 256-bit encryption. AES 256-bit encryption is commonplace. That hasn't been circumvented to my knowledge at this point in time, which means someone can't identify something with 256-bit AES encryption and reverse engineer it and find a loophole in order to be able to determine what information you've put in there. So an app with 256-bit encryption and a good password controlling access to the app is secure enough to protect your private personal information, and a lot of those apps have a generator, so you can generate a nice secure password, use that for the account, save that password into your app, and you can refer to that all of the time. You can write them down on pieces of paper and keep them in a safe place at home. All of that is completely acceptable. If you don't have a smartphone, just think about where that information is, how easy it is to access. Obviously, if that book went missing for whatever reason, you would need to very quickly run around and change logons and passwords and re-secure yourself. Okay, so that covers passwords, and most of your online accounts. But what about when people are trying to circumvent your home security? How can they do that? Well, again, there's two basic ways. Now, this is assuming that you've got some sort of cable connection from your home network connecting you to the internet, or you've got an ADSL type connection and a modem router, probably a Wi-Fi modem router. So the two predominant ways are gaining access to your public IP, circumventing the security on your modem router, and then getting access to anything connected to your little home network. The other way is getting you to do all of the work, putting out a honeypot, something that looks really, really attractive. There's a free piece of software that's normally $100 and it's free for this week only, whatever. Website looks legitimate, everything looks kosher. It takes 15 minutes to knock up a dodgy website. So they make it look great, too good to be true. You download the software and it contains malware, spyware, viruses that then exploit your system internally. And most of those kinds of things are either there to make a mess of your network for fun, or they're there to steal information. And they do that very easily by just watching what you do. They might sit there very quietly in the background and log your keystrokes when you log onto your internet banking. Or they may simply create a little text file of light with information and things that you do, the websites that you visit, what files you've got on your computer and so on. And the next time you connect to the internet, it just quietly sends that text file off to the nefarious character in the background, and you've lost a whole heap of information. So that happens because you've downloaded something and didn't have proper security set up on your computer, your end device. A firewall, some antivirus software, anti-malware software, McAfee, Zone Alarm, Norton's 360, Spybot. All of those packages are great, and they can usually pick up the majority of things that you'll accidentally download if you do, before they become an actual infection on your computer and compromise your security. So that's you downloading a file and letting the file do something on your network. But the other one that's harder to capture, especially if you're the average home user, is someone trying to access your home network from the Wild Wild West, the internet. How do they do that? So if we take a look at this crude little drawing that I've put together, and I'll move in a bit closer in a moment. So basically, the Wild Wild West, the World Wide Web, so the internet in general, someone from anywhere in the world can connect to their ISP, which is connected to the internet, access anything on the internet, including your ISP and the way you are currently connected to the internet, which in this case, in this example, I've just said ADSL. So anyone in the world accessing through your ISP's connection to what is, a little drawing down the bottom there, what I've drawn is a little publicly accessible IP address, a 180.20.10.10 number. That's like a phone number. Anyone on the internet can see that number. It is publicly accessible, and it needs to be, otherwise you wouldn't be able to access the internet. But in your home environment, you probably got an automatically generated internal address like a 192.168.1.10 number. That's the internal number inside your home network, and that is not publicly visible and not easily accessible from the internet. It's not supposed to be. So the way that works, without going into too much technical topology and detail, the IP address that is public, the 181 in that example, can be seen by anybody in the internet. They will attempt to find that number and then start probing it, and they probe it for vulnerabilities, and some vulnerabilities can mean no security at all, internally publicly accessible IP addresses, and look, there's a raft of issues there: network address translation, port address translation, firewalls, stateful packet inspection. Too much detail for this video, but most of the time you'll have network address translation turned on, and that's where those two numbers come into play. Anything inside your house, inside your personal network or your work network for that matter, will have a non-routable range of IP addresses, probably the 192.168 range. So you can be sitting at your laptop in your lounge room or computer room. Your laptop will have 192.168.1.10. You'll type in www.google.com to get to Google's homepage. That goes to your modem router, whether you're connected via a cable or via Wi-Fi, and it flips the number from 192.168 to the 180.10 number and sends that out onto the internet. Because it can't send the 192 number, it's not routable, and it uses network address translation to be more secure as well. Sends the 192 number, sends the 180 number out onto the internet. Google gets it, sees that you want a web page, the home page, the search engine, sends that back, hits your modem router as 180.20.10.10, flips it over to 192.168.1.10 and sends it to your laptop or whatever computer you use to make that request. So that's the way IP works in the most simplistic form, and network address translation works. Most modem routers are set up that way by default. Most people don't change them. There are two primary vulnerabilities for something like a home Wi-Fi modem router network. The first one is to leave the standard username and standard password on the modem router. It's sometimes always admin with password admin, or admin with password password. It might get a bit more sophisticated and they might write them on a sticker that they put on your device, but ultimately they're not too hard to figure out, especially if you've not changed them. First thing you can do by protecting yourself at home, or to protect yourself at home, change the username and the password. Change both. Gives you an extra layer. If they can automatically assume that the logon's admin, they've only got to guess the password. But if you've changed the logon from admin, they've got to guess that as well as the password. Takes much longer. So most people will give up because that kind of attack is brute force, takes a long time. They possibly haven't got an idea of a profile because it's not like they know who you are. They're just identifying you via the IP address and trying to probe for vulnerabilities. Make it hard for them, they'll give up and go away. So how else can someone access your home network? The other common way is locally, and it is through different types of Wi-Fi vulnerabilities. So in order to secure yourself at home, if you're using a Wi-Fi, if you're not using a Wi-Fi, it's typically not an issue. But if you're using a Wi-Fi, which is commonplace, there's a couple of things that you need to know about or take into consideration. First one, the level of encryption that you're using on your Wi-Fi. You'll probably see on your router, it's fairly common to have WPS, WPA, PSK, WPA, AES, and a few other derivatives. Some might say WPA2 Enterprise or Personal. Anything in the WPA2 class is fairly secure, hasn't been breached to my knowledge, and yep, you can be pretty comfortable that they're not going to be getting through any sort of system vulnerabilities. If you choose a terrible password, to make it really, really easy for them to guess, then they can guess the password, they can get access to your Wi-Fi network and do whatever it is that they want to do. So strong password, strong encryption level. Pretty much pick the highest one that your router can do, as long as it's compatible with the rest of the devices that will connect to your Wi-Fi network. The other one is sometimes what's called push technology, WPS, I think they call it. WPS push technology. So there's a button that you can hit. You don't have to type in any passwords when you're connecting another device to that network. It is assuming that you have physical access to the router. So you fire up a new device like a computer or a laptop, connect to the Wi-Fi network. The Wi-Fi module on the laptop and the guide that will go through, the setup guide will say go and press the WPS, the push button on the modem router. The two talk, set each other up, and you're connected to the network on the laptop. That is a security vulnerability. No, we're not assuming that anyone can get inside your house and hit the button. It actually has a security vulnerability built into it, and the easiest thing to do is turn that off. The third main vulnerability on a Wi-Fi modem router is what's called ultra plug and play, UPnP. You'll see it turned on a lot of devices, and it is a security vulnerability, not a common one, but it does allow for additional probing and additional attacks to be implemented on your Wi-Fi network, and they can get access that way. The easiest thing to do to avoid that vulnerability is turn off ultra plug and play. Ensure that your username and password has been changed on the modem router, and make sure that you've got the highest level of encryption available on your Wi-Fi side of the house. And that's the best way to protect yourself in the home environment. Make sure you've got good and reputable antivirus, anti-spyware, malware software, Zone Alarm, McAfee, Norton's 360, any of those, AVG, all those packages pick up the vast majority of things that might get into your network via a software download. And that is the easiest way to protect yourself at home. So thanks very much for joining me and watching the show. Subscribers are always welcome, so feel free to subscribe, that would be great. And I hope you'll join me again next week.